So the whole anatomy of a transition, as per William Bridges, is, um, we look at the ending, and like I say, I really spend some time on that because I want our society to learn how to do endings a little better, how to honor them, even ritual. And we have dumped all ritual. Create their own ritual. I've had somebody have a Star Wars party because started their job the year Star Wars came out. So they had a full-on Star Wars party. But people
That's so cool.
I know. Take off for a month. Take off for a week. Do the Camino Trail. That's a big one. Just everybody has their own, and they get to make their own, and they get to create their own. So also helping to move them out of fear, Michele. People are so scared. Every step, we're scared.
Welcome to the GenX Shift podcast, a show for Gen Xers who are navigating some pretty tough transitions and aren't sure how to move forward. I'm your host, Michele Walter, proud Gen Xer, former lawyer turned entrepreneur, huge Jason Momoa fan, and margarita snob. And I've navigated a lot of transitions in my life, from losing my mom suddenly to a heart attack to starting my own business. But I often did it all on my own because I was too stubborn to ask for help. Now I'm on a mission to give actionable strategies to other Gen Xers so that they can find the confidence, courage, and clarity they need to make a shift. So let's rock and roll. Hey, Gen X, welcome back to the podcast. I'm sitting down this week with Suzanne Campi, who is an expert in guiding people through transitions. She's a coach who actually reached out to me after she found the podcast, and I was thrilled to make her connection because she is dialed in when it comes to shepherding people through transitions, whether those are involuntary or voluntary transitions. Spoiler alert, Suzanne is a boomer. She's the first boomer that I've had on the show. And so part of our conversation, we get into the similarities and the differences between Gen X and boomers, as well as how those two generations are approaching transitions differently from the younger generations. I've said a number of times on this podcast that one of my goals is to build bridges within the Gen X community and also between the different generations. And as Suzanne and I talk about, I think there's a lot of wisdom that Gen Xers and boomers can gain from the younger generations when it comes to making transitions. The two major topics that we focus on in this conversation are around career shifts, whether you're trying to change your job or maybe start your own business or transition from your career into the second topic we talk about, which is retirement. And I found Suzanne's insights and experience on this topic of retirement really freeing because, speaking for myself, when I think of retirement, I tend to get bogged down by the financial piece of it. But Suzanne has a really different and holistic approach to retirement. She has a free wheel that you can download on her website. I'll link that in the show notes, which has about 7 or 8 categories that you want to be thinking of when you're thinking about your retirement, because retirement ain't just about the finances. We walk through these categories and we get a sense of how you can start to build a more holistic retirement for yourself that can free you up a little bit from the heaviness of just focusing on the finances. This conversation takes a lot of twists and turns, which I love. Suzanne and I both think that there are no things such as tangents because every little side path, every little quote unquote tangent has its own wisdom and juicy nuggets in it. And one of the tangents that we take is around fear and how much fear we all have nowadays, especially when it comes to fear about making a transition in our life. I'm guessing if you're facing a transition, one of the things in your way is fear about what life looks like on the other side of that transition. So we have a really great conversation around fear and what might be triggering the fear and how fear can be both healthy and supportive, as well as being a great motivator instead of being a paralyzer that keeps you stuck in your tracks. I really enjoyed this conversation. I'm excited to build this new connection with Suzanne. I think she's a wealth of wisdom for anyone looking to move through transition with more ease, more freedom, more clarity. So sit back and enjoy this conversation with Suzanne and I'll see you on the other side. All right. Welcome, Suzanne. Thanks for coming on the Gen X Shift podcast and for bearing with the technical difficulties at the beginning.
Thank you, Michele. Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
I'm really excited that you reached out. I always like to let folks know how I know our guests, and we go way back.
We do.
Like 3 weeks?
Yep. Someday we'll be saying that, Michele.
Yeah, I hope so. I really do hope so, because you actually sent me an email. You'd found the podcast or the website. I'm not even sure which you saw.
I ran across your podcast. I'm a podcast junkie.
Ah, that's good to know. It's good to know it's getting out there. So,
out there.
Yeah, and you sent me an email saying I specialize in coaching people through transitions. And I'm like, well, this is my gal. Let's have her on the show. So I'm really glad that that synchronicity, as I like to call them, happened. And we had a great pre-call conversation. And I think this is going to be a really fun episode for folks to start thinking about a couple of topics in particular that we're going to focus on, which is career shifts and the identity shifts that come along with that, and also retirement, because a lot of your focus in your coaching business is on coaxing people through retirement and everything that comes along with that. So I hope this conversation will really help ease people's transitions through any career shift and retirement. So
I hope so too, Michele.
Yeah. Well, I want to rewind the tape a little bit and kind of give folks a little bit of your background, and right off the bat, let folks know that you are my first boomer on the podcast.
Yay. I know when I reached out to you, I hesitated to. I thought, do I have the right as a boomer to reach out to an Xer? Until I realized many of you are only 2 years younger than me. So I think we overlap.
And it's just a label at the end of the day. I mean, yes. I love it. Some labels are great if they serve you well. And I think the Gen X label serves a lot of us well. And there are ways that it doesn't serve us well, just like labels for all the other generations. And so I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again on the podcast. Yes, if you are not a Gen Xer and you want to be on the podcast, reach out, because I really want to use this podcast. And you and I talked about this to build bridges between the generations and within the Gen X group of folks too, because I think each generation has such wisdom and gifts to share that we can all benefit from, regardless of what our generation is. So I'm glad that you reached out.
Me too, Michele. It made me really take a look at Gen Xers. I thought, okay, who are Gen Xers? And when I talked to you, I know on our discovery call, you kind of said, we're trying to figure that out too. So I didn't realize how similar we were. I didn't realize that I really align a little more so with the Xers than I do with baby boomers who are 15 years older than me, or 18 years older than me.
Yeah, because it's a big span, each generation. I think the boomers probably have like the biggest span, I think, out of Gen Xers and millennials and Gen Z. I don't know where Gen X falls in that, but yeah, you're 62. Do you mind me? I guess I already shared your age.
Yeah. No, that's totally fine. You don't have to edit it out. I was born in 62 and I am 62.
Yeah. So you are closer to that older end of the Gen X label.
I am.
So, at the end of the day, I just like to get yes.
Oh, sorry.
I like to, that's okay. Math, not my strong suit. So that's okay. But I think what's interesting is if we look at those labels in terms of getting curious about when we grew up and where we grew up, the time periods, the culture, the society, what was going on at that time, how that has impacted our journey, and really more so than the label itself of the generation. So I'd love to just have you take us back a little bit and share what it was like for you growing up. I guess that would be probably in the 60s and 70s, correct? Right. Yeah. And what that was like for you, and particularly how you think maybe messages and experiences that you had growing up might have eventually led you into what you are doing now in terms of coaching people through transitions. So take us back in time a little bit. Okay.
Well, I was born the youngest of 8 kids in Oakland and raised in the same house all my life. I know I listened to your podcast yesterday. Somebody moved like 3 times by the time she was 1. I said, I didn't move until I moved out of the house to go to college. So it was a really nice time, and I find so many similarities between how I was raised and ran around the neighborhood, walked myself to school, walked myself home. We were free. We actually took off out the door in the morning, and what my mom rang an actual dinner bell to get us back home because there was 8 of us.
It's
And
awesome.
we'd hear the bell and go darting, and we better get there fast because dinner was an absolute must that we sat at the dinner table together, which was really nice. I mean, I was very lucky. It was a little Leave It to Beaverish. My dad walked out the door at 7:30 and came back in at 5:30. He had his own business, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom. And it's funny, I find that's the one difference between the boomers and the Gen Xers are latchkey kids came into be when you came along. There was a
Yep.
lot more moms working. Whereas with the boomers, I remember one kid in our class, his mom worked, one kid out of like 35.
Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah, it really is. So that was a huge difference. I don't know what it meant in the long run. Maybe that's why y'all are very independent, but we are too, because we were never home. Like I said, I was walking myself home, cried the whole way in kindergarten, but I walked home,
Oh,
and it was a good 3/4 of a mile or a mile. It's so
uphill both ways, I'm sure.
it really was, and I took my kids to prove it. I took them back there, said, "You got to see it. It really is uphill both ways." It really was. There was a lot of hills in Oakland. But anyway, it was wonderful. It was simple. And when my mom watched me raise my kids, 30 years later, she said, "Wow, it's so complicated now. You have to put them in your car to go everywhere." We never went. If we were in a rush, we ran. We didn't walk. We didn't get a ride. So it was very, very simple. She didn't drive us to our school. She didn't drive us to sports. All the sports were at the school. So simplicity it was. And the TV had a few channels, and we fought over the remote control, and that was it. That was it. So, I went on and married young, and I think that was another a little more typical of the boomers than of the Xers. Married at 23 and I had kids at 25 and 27. So I gave birth to millennials. I think we had, when I'm listening to your podcast, I realized so many Xers had it very, very much the same. We were a lot more
Yeah.
independent. We raised ourselves, so to speak.
Yeah. And I find that really fascinating that 2 generations, the boomers and the Gen Xers, who grew up pretty independent and kind of feral, is a word that we hear a lot,
Yes.
ended up raising kids that like the parent, and I'm not a parent, so I'm just speaking from observation of other parents, that I don't know what happened, that the kids of boomers and Gen Xers don't have that same independence. And I think there's a lot of factors for that, society, all kinds of things. But it is interesting to look back. I was a latchkey kid. So my mom went back to work, after I started elementary school. And I think that did contribute to my rugged individualism and independence in so many ways, because I came home from school and I was fixing myself a snack. I was doing some chores, vacuuming or dusting, and doing my homework, for several hours until one of my parents came home. And so just we learned to fend for ourselves.
Yes, we
And
did.
so I'm curious why, and I'm speaking in generalizations, which I hesitate to do, but as a general matter, that's not something that the boomers and Gen Xers then necessarily passed on to their kids.
You know what? We swung the pendulum a little too far, didn't we? It's almost like I think we may have felt a little neglected. And like my best friend, she was one of 11, and she always used to say, it was my mom's school of having your children raise themselves. That was her heart. That's the way she raised us. I really think we did. And we also had 2 kids as opposed to 8. When you're one of 8 kids, of course you weren't, but I was. I mean, things were different. And I do think we just may have felt a little more like, our kids, the parents from the 50s didn't really communicate with us. They loved us. We knew they loved us, but there was never, you did not feel a feel. You did not express any discontent or malcontent with anything, or you got teased or told you were a whiner. So So I think we felt very shut down. I think we felt that we couldn't speak up. And I know some kids in my family felt that more than others. That I think that's really why we coddled our kids a little more. We wanted them to have a voice.
Mhm.
And I do think we swung it too far a little.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
keeps swinging that far because kids are helicoptered now. Again, a generalization, I know. I don't, but we,
I,
every pendulum, one thing my mom said that I thought was very good advice is the pendulum always swings and then it kind of swings back a little. And same with politics and everything else.
Yep.
We go too far, we rein it back in. So we'll see what happens next.
I agree with that observation 100%. I think whether we're talking about our own personal growth or societal growth or fighting against oppression or systems, whatever it is, that pendulum always does seem to swing way to the other side. And the hope is that it eventually kind of equalizes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And you said that
there was a fear of pedophiles and there's a fear of people that were going to hurt our children. And we took them to school farther away. Quite often it wasn't just the neighborhood school. Now it's the one across town that you like better than the neighborhood one. So now they're in the car all day. So there's a lot of factors there. And a lot of it is fear, and it's funny. I've spoken on fear. Fear drives a lot and it makes people paranoid. We fear they're going to get hurt. We fear they're going to get kidnapped if they walk down the street by themselves. So
fear can be a wonderful motivator and a horrible paralyzer, so it's all about our relationship to the fear and how we're experiencing it. And I want to come back. You mentioned the helicoptering. I'm guessing I should actually look this up, but I feel like the phrase helicopter parent came about because of Gen Xers and maybe some younger boomers in their parenting style. I don't think that was a phrase back when you were growing up or when I was growing up. You didn't hear helicopter parent at all.
Absolutely not. I don't think there was any.
So 8 kids, by the way. I can't even imagine. I have one younger brother who's almost 11 years younger than me. And so, of course, I babysat him. I was sort of like a third parent almost to him growing up, as I'm sure a lot of the kids in your family parented the younger kids. That's just, what we did. And so just fast forwarding a little bit, because you have such a fascinating professional background. And one of the things that I love to get curious about with people who I know who have been in the corporate world like you were, and I want you to talk a little bit about that, or in the government world like I was, how we eventually come to making that shift into having our own businesses, especially at later stages in life. So talk to me a little bit about your transition into the corporate world and out of it.
Well, I've gone in and out of it a few times. So I started doing that at a young age. I was pretty much independent when I sold real estate back in the day. Then I did go into recruiting. We actually, as a family, did a little stint in Asia for a few years. So when I came back from that, I went back into real estate, and then I went back into recruiting. And I just didn't like the corporate thing. I think I'm a real stereotypic youngest. I really do. I don't like following rules. I don't want to sit in a cubicle. I don't want to, it's really bad. My dad was an entrepreneur. He had his own business, and as did a few of my siblings. It's in our blood to be somewhat stubborn as hell and independent. And so maybe we don't play in the sandbox so well with others. But, yes, this time it's interesting. It's a little different because I did just come out of corporate. And as I was in it, I was dying on the vine a little bit. Remember once my daughter walked by me I was holding my hand in my head and just kind of sliding down the table. And I thought, oh my gosh, my soul is turning black and dying inside. I can't do this anymore. It gets really hard when you're older to play the political game. You've seen it all before. You've seen it all. You've seen the same players. So to see those politics, or especially to see people mistreated in corporate, it's really hard. It's really hard to align your soul with it. So I just felt I needed to align my soul with my work. And I had, I've been coaching on and off for about 7 years. So coming back into it full time just became mandatory for everybody involved. And I love it. I just love it. I was, it's hard to let go of some golden handcuffs. It really is. my hand was forced because I was laid off. I was so ready.
Absolutely.
I was so ready. There was other layoffs and I'm like, wait a minute, why not me? It's my turn to be laid off. But it's a little scary. It's scary, it's scary to be independent, but it keeps me alive. It really floats my boat. I love working with my clients. Absolutely love it. Should have done it sooner.
I want to come back to a couple of things that you said there. And the first one, I really resonate with I am not a rule follower. I don't like working for other people. That was me from day one.
But you ended up as an attorney?
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Yeah. Now we know, which is the other comment that I resonate with, that you said that like my soul was turning black. Mm-hmm. And I think that was part of why. I mean, God love attorneys. Most of my friends are attorneys and I love them to death. And like the legal profession as a whole, like, dear God, that's where souls go to die. I feel like sometimes. I know there's people who love being an attorney and more power to you. But I definitely, whether that's I think a combination of an individual trait of mine and also a generational thing, because a lot of Gen Xers and boomers too are known for that rebellious, we're not going to follow the rules, my way or the highway kind of mentality. And that is definitely me. And I think one of the biggest reasons that I wanted to work for myself, and it sounds like it was maybe contributed to you wanting to have your own business too. What are some of the traits or kind of characteristics you feel like that contributed to you wanting to start your own business and be an entrepreneur that, are kind of a factor of growing up when you did and being a boomer?
Well, I think one thing is, it was modeled. My dad did it. And I'm totally ADD. Fess up. I'm totally ADD. And that's why I have had so many I dip my toe in different things. And again, I think it was growing up a boomer, growing up the youngest. You just kind of, you're the one who entertains everybody and spins in circles and dances. And I just take things a little more lightly than other people, I think, which isn't always a good thing.
No, but I find that a really cool observation, because I feel like, just from my experience, and it sounds like your experience, for those of us that A, aren't rule followers, and B, who take things a little less seriously and have a little lighter outlook on life, being in those kind of corporate, really professional, and honestly, I hate that word professional. It triggers me in so many ways for a variety of reasons. But being in that kind of, quote, professional environment is really hard and really does take a toll on our souls, because we're just like, why is everybody so uptight about everything all the time and anal and nitpicky and type A? Like, drives me nuts.
Not authentic.
Yes.
It just feels like everybody's putting on an act. You can tell when you go out and have a drink with them later. My God, it was all an act.
Yep.
Because they're totally different afterwards. And a lot of them, they are drinking a lot because they're so juxtaposed in their positions. I don't know. I really wish I could. I wished I could have corporated it up better, but it's just
corporated it up.
I really wish I could have. I see people all happy and singing the corporate song, and I'm like, oh. That's why it really did work for me for many years. I was a contract recruiter, meaning I would take on contracts. That was perfect because I didn't have to get into the political game.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, I have said often that there were things I loved about being an attorney, and I think the things that I loved about being an attorney are the reasons why I wanted to start my business, like public speaking and writing and working with people. Those were skills that just were misplaced as an attorney. And so I think for 20 some years, I felt like I was playing dress up. There was such a cognitive dissonance between who I fundamentally felt like I was and that literal suit that I had to put on to play an attorney every day. And when you live, and this is like for Gen Xers, boomers, millennials, I don't care who you are, listen to this. If you live for years and years in that state of cognitive dissonance, that's going to start to take a toll. Yes. And that's when you start to feel, as you said, like your soul is turning black. So tell me a little bit about the focus of your business and the work that you are doing and with people moving them through transitions.
Right, right. So I think I remember the first time I thought it would be really interesting to work with people in transitions in life. And it was back literally in 1991. I think it was 91. There was a huge Oakland fire. And at the time, I was not living in Oakland. I wasn't living with my parents. I was grown with two little kids. But my parents' house burned down, and there was over 3,200 structures that went down. So literally, there's blocks and blocks of chimneys. It was a tragedy, and as we've seen so many times since, fires are. But it was very interesting to watch. My parents were a good example. Watch how people dealt with it. So they would have things like at the local church hall, they would have people who came in to help, people, a bunch of, insurance adjusters, people that spoke. And my sister's was in HR at the time in Silicon Valley, and she and some of her friends came up to help. And they used William Bridges' book on transitions. And William Bridges is known for a couple of his books on transitions, and he systematizes it a bit. So they had a lot to offer as far as sharing their info, sharing this information, trying to help people hold hand, let them know this is a difficult situation, terrible ending, and some steps to move through it. And people weren't interested in the help, as I recall. And I thought what they had to say was so interesting. And it was so interesting to watch because my parents would talk about, well, the so-and-sos, they moved. Some people moved away. Some people stayed. My dad, actually, the way he processed it was he had built the house 40 years old sooner. So he was traumatized. The house he had protected, he had raised his 8 kids in, gone. He tried to save it with a hose. That obviously didn't work. It was a firestorm. He walked on that property every day for a year. Every day you knew where to find him. He would just
man. That is so traumatic.
It was so
for him
traumatic.
And for your family.
And he processed it and he talked about it a lot. My mom had different ways of coping, but they were both, when they started calling them fire victims, my mom would be, oh, I'm not a victim. She would not take that label. And I admired her for it. They bought a condo nearby so they could sort themselves out and figure out what they were going to do. And they were holding other people up. They would, go to church and talk to people. And when some people moved away. A lot of people really, really, really whined a lot. And some people literally curled up and died. Some people built the same house. They literally got the plans and built the identical house. Others improved on the house. So it was just interesting to see psychologically how these people en masse dealt with such a tragedy. And I have to admit, my parents made us proud. They sorted it out. They figured it out. My dad decided he did not want to have to build the house again. Wasn't going to deal with that dang city again. And they moved closer to 4 of us kids in a different area. And it was it ended up perfectly fine. So anyway, that was my first, well, no, most people don't see change on such a large scale.
How old were you when that happened?
You know what? I think I was 29. It was,
yeah,
I think it was 29 because my kids are 2 and 4. So that's when I started being interested in the topic, but I had a few careers in the meantime. But all along, I was reading about how people, it just fascinates me, how people deal with what's put in front of them. And there's all sorts of change. I mean, there's change that's forced upon you tragically, like a fire, loss of a job, loss of a spouse, loss of a marriage. And then there's also changes that you choose, like retirement. And that's a fun one to work with because it is a choice, yet it goes through the same process. No matter what change comes, it usually came because of an ending. So no new beginning can start being processed until you really stop and process that ending. And that's kind of what I was talking about with my dad. He processed it. He did it his way, which was to talk to anybody who walked by about it, which was all of us, and walking on that lot every day. It was sad, but it was his process. It was okay that it was sad. And that's another thing in Western society, and I've heard you talk about this a little bit on your podcast, we completely try to run through things. We have something terrible happen, a divorce, somebody has an affair, and we try to race through it and not deal with the pain. And I think that's really basic and it's very fundamental, but backing up to what just happened? What's my pain here? And feeling it, just feeling it.
Racing through, it's all some kind of resistance.
Absolutely.
Racing through, ignoring it, denying it, wishing it didn't happen, all resistance that just compounds the pain. And I love what you said about having to process the ending before you can start to process the beginning. I think that's a really powerful quote.
And we tend to like you and I said, whitewash right over that.
Yeah.
We don't want to feel that pain, so we're going to race through, My mom died. I don't want to feel the pain, so I'm just going to get really busy.
Yeah.
It will come. You can run, but you cannot hide. It will.
No.
Grief rears its head.
And that's both, again, a number of factors contribute to that. And it's both a generational thing for a lot of people and a societal, cultural thing for a lot of people, especially here in the United States. We don't get the message growing up. I think younger generations are getting more of that message, but us older farts didn't get the message of it's okay to be sad. It's okay to grieve. Good God, I don't even think the word grief was in my vocabulary growing up until a few years ago, So we didn't get that message. And so consequently, we just bulldozed through or ignored it or shoved it down. So I want to come back to your personal transition, because I'm curious what your breaking point was, essentially, or if you even got to a breaking point that was the real motivation for you to let go of the golden handcuffs and to fully embrace the entrepreneurial life.
You know what, Michele? I think the older we get, and the beauty of getting older is we can't hide from ourselves anymore. We get more authentic, and I love the word authentic. We do become, if we're lucky and if we're somewhat introspective, we become more of ourselves, right? We take a look at ourselves a little deeper, a little more deeply. We really try to figure out what makes us tick, what has made us tick in the past, and what's not worked, and what might work. And I tell you, my soul was turning black. I'm not kidding. I felt so incongruent with who I was in the work I was doing. Especially recruiting. It's kind of a cold job. As much as it's super fun to hire that one person, for every one you got to turn down 100, and it's rough. It's brutal. And I used to call them, and I'd say, this is the worst part of my job, but I have to tell you, no, it was awful. It's awful, and people are desperate out there, and they get led on, and then nope, you're not it. So I don't want to have to hurt people like that in my work every day. So this is my calling. It's my calling to partner with them and move them through, hold up a mirror and move them through with just excitement and verve for their next thing, whatever it is. Because I don't only work in transitions, but for the most part, that's why people start looking for a coach. Something's changed.
So I want to talk about your process and those couple of topic areas in terms of career shifts and retirement. And before we move to that, I just want to reflect something that I really appreciate that you make this distinction, because that's a distinction I've been picking up on too a lot between voluntary and involuntary transitions or shifts. My mom dying, an involuntary transition in my life, right? Divorce for some people, involuntary transition. And also recognizing that sometimes these transitions can be a combination of both. And I think it sounds like for both you and me, that shift from our stable, golden handcuff, well-paying, good benefit jobs was both voluntary and involuntary. And it was involuntary in the sense that it sounded like truly starting to kill both of us, just take that toll on our soul to the extent that, at least for me, I questioned why I was here and didn't want to be here anymore. That feels like an involuntary transition. And also the conscious decision to leave that world and to start your own business, or even just to do something different, that's a voluntary transition. So I think that's cool to start to think about shifts in those categories and kind of see which it is, or if it's a combination of those. So I appreciate you highlighting that. So let's start with the career shift piece of it and how you work with people. And that's kind of why I was curious about your own shift into being an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
What are you seeing mostly with clients that come to you and they feel at this crossroads in their career? What are they coming to you with or wanting to work through?
Quite often, I do heavily emphasize retirement. So quite often it's retirement. And it's quite often with retirement, they have the financial piece nailed now. And it's what the heck else am I going to do? Not only but I back them up. I mean, it's what you're going to do, that'll come. But who are you going to be now? You're not this human doing. You're not out there having to do and get up and do and make meetings and do. You're going to be now. So who are you going to be? You get to actually reinvent. And I find that so exciting. And quite often people come to me in any change pretty scared, pretty down, kind of downtrodden. So kind of lifting them up to realize their greatness is number one. And if they're coming to me because they're going through a change, we find out what that ending was. Sometimes they don't even know, or what that ending will be, and how will they process that. Sometimes they really need to, like, especially in the case of retirement, they need to honor the heck out of what they've done for their whole career, the sacrifices they've made, the children they've raised, everything they've done. They need to honor that and respect themselves for it and praise themselves for it. I think we also as a society don't tend to really kind of look at ourselves and go, yeah, I did it. And I did a good dang job. And especially, I hate to say, women do not take a look at their fabulousness.
Totally.
So my goal is to get them to take that step back, and they'll choose. I never choose anything. I just help guide them and help, like I said, hold up a mirror so they can take their next steps. So the whole anatomy of a transition, as per William Bridges, is, we look at the ending. And like I say, I really spend some time on that because I want our society to learn how to do endings a little better, how to honor them, even ritual. And we have dumped all ritual. What do we got? We don't have much in our society as far as ritual. Create their own ritual. I've had somebody have a Star Wars party because they ended their job they started their job the year Star Wars came out. So they had a full-on Star Wars party. But people
That's so cool.
I know. Take off for a month. Take off for a week. Do the Camino Trail. That's a big one now. That's a hot topic. Is the Camino Trail, 2 months, 3 months, and sometimes they come home, turn around, and go back. People are addicted to the Camino. I've got to find out what that's all about. So just everybody has their own, and they get to make their own, and they get to create their own. Quite often it involves big parties with their families, and some people just want none of that. They just want to hang out and process on their own. So also helping to move them out of fear, Michele. People are so scared. Every step we're scared. I feel like it's a society pandemic right now is fear. And it just seems to keep growing. So getting them to be excited about life again.
I want to pause on a couple of things there. First of all, total tangent, but I first got fascinated with the Camino. There's a movie with Martin Sheen called The Way. Yes. If you're interested, have you seen that?
I've seen it. Yep.
Yeah, that piqued my curiosity about the Camino. So that's pretty much all I know about it. The other thing that I wanted to come back to, though, and I appreciate you mentioning William Bridges, and I think he wrote a couple of books. Is there one in particular? Because I want to make sure and link it in the show notes for folks.
Life Transitions was the first one, and then Managing Transitions, I think, was the second. Yeah,
okay, I'm gonna link both of those in the show notes. And I want to just, what'd you find?
What's funny, he has butterflies on the front of those, and I was just thinking of getting a butterfly tattoo. It's interesting.
Oh, see, there you go. I think that's not a coincidence. Synchronicity, one of my favorite words. Yeah,
I know. Signs. Right?
So I want to tease this apart a little bit because I really want folks to pay attention. And so if you've been doing other stuff, maybe come back to this, folks, and really listen to this point. first of all, to check out the work of Bridges and to really start to get curious about the process that you're describing that you take people through. And one of the first steps in that is to really honor the ending and to even recognize, well, what is the ending here? And to create some ritual around that ending, which you're so right. We don't do ritual and we don't celebrate worth a crap in this country. I am constantly telling my clients and myself to celebrate. And I think coming back to one of your points about fear, I think anyway, there's a lot of fear or hesitation for people to celebrate. Because a lot of people, especially of our generations, are afraid it will make us look like we're bragging. And God forbid we brag because we'll look too arrogant or egotistical. I get that. And that's not what we're talking about. You can celebrate without becoming an egomaniac. The reason that we celebrate, and this is, I think, the other hesitation, is that it actually starts to build the skill set of us being able to see opportunities and see the positive things in life, not from a toxic positivity standpoint. But the more we celebrate, the more we kind of install those feelings of celebration. We know from a neuroscience perspective that starts to rewire us so that we can actually see things in our life that are celebration worthy. And I think the other hesitancy, the B to that, is some people think, well, if I celebrate, then I'm just going to be like getting a cookie for getting out of bed every day. Like, again, talking about the pendulum swinging too far. Like, if I celebrate, then it's like I get a medal for everything. And we're not talking about that either. So we're not talking about becoming an egomaniac. We're not talking about getting a cookie for just taking a breath. It's something in the middle. And so I think that's really important for folks to heed that lesson of learn to celebrate more things in your life so that when you're in the midst of one of these transitions, you can really look back at your 20-year career and celebrate that. Celebrate what you learned from it, even though it's now ending. So
I love so much that you said there, Michele, especially the rewiring part. Why is it not okay to be happy and goofy and celebrate? And, neurons that fire together, wire together. Maybe we can make it a little more of a habit, right? I love that.
Absolutely.
That's a brilliant way to look at it. And you know what else I think factors in there? I think people are a little superstitious. If they celebrate, remember what Brene Brown, she said, oh gosh, those days when things are so great and you put the kids to bed and you just had this great family day, you look at them and think, oh, they're going to die tomorrow.
Yes.
I mean,
the shoe's going to drop.
We catastrophize like crazy.
Yes. God, what is that about? I'm so curious. That could be a podcast episode. Right?
We say
where does it come from?
But we are.
We totally are. And I think, again, especially our generations, and kind of generalizing here, but it's like, oh, better not celebrate because the other shoe might drop. Like, where does that come from? And I think it does come from, when we start to look back at generations, like my grandpa's generation, the Great Depression, World War II, people weren't getting excited about shit then because stuff was really hitting the fan.
It was going down.
So like we're not going to get excited because we may not be able to eat tomorrow, right? So I think that's kind of a carryover from a lot of that. So
I always thought it was because my mom was kind of an Irish Catholic. Irish people are a little superstitious, and that whole Catholic thing, you have to be careful. Don't be too big for your britches. That was her. Don't be too big for your britches. It's like, well, I can't, Mom, because you're going to need to compliment me in order for that to happen.
I'm so glad you said that because we're getting off on a tangent, which is
tangents are
actually, I know, absolutely. I'm a big believer in tangents. There's always juiciness in the tangents, but we are going to come back to your process. But sticking with that tangent for a minute, God, I'm so glad you said that because I completely forgot about that kind of saying, like, don't get too big for your britches. And that's that, like, don't be an egomaniac. And I get that. I don't like egomaniacs either because really people who are super arrogant, it's just fear underneath the surface, right? And so I think I'm putting some pieces together and coming back to what you said about fear. I think if somebody is super arrogant and egomaniac, and if somebody is celebrating every time they get out of bed, they get a cookie, underneath both of those extremes, I think is some kind of fear, like some kind of, I'm not going to be enough. It's not going to be enough. So I have to overcompensate one way or another. And so
if we come to the middle, if the pendulum kind of equalizes back to the middle, we really are able to celebrate and honor ourselves from a place of recognizing that we've done enough, we're good enough, we are enough, and there's no fear underneath that. It just kind of all came to me as you were talking about the fear and kind of wondering why there's so much fear. I think because we have some very shitty examples of people who celebrate in ways that's fear-based. So let's find some good examples to celebrate that is not fear-based.
Yes, I love that. And also people, anytime back to your comment about the arrogance, the overwrought arrogance, I cannot see that now. It is another age thing without just going, oh, that poor soul. I wonder what happened.
Yeah.
And they'll be boastful and pounding their chest, and it's out of fear. It's out of insecurity. And that's interesting because when you said you are enough, I hear that so much now, and I'm not really sure. That's definitely come up in the last few years, Remind yourself you're enough. You are enough. You see it on T-shirts. I was kind of wondering where that came from, but now that you say that.
I don't know where it comes from either. I think for me, I don't know that comes from mindfulness, but for me, I kind of look at it through a mindfulness lens, that really what we're saying when we're saying I'm enough, or I'm doing enough, or I have enough, it's not that we don't ever want to keep moving forward. It's recognizing that in this moment, I'm okay. I have enough. I'm here, I'm breathing, and so it brings in the teachings of mindfulness to allow acceptance and allowance just for what is in this moment. It doesn't mean you don't keep working toward things. Like, I recognize I have enough and I still want a camper van, and that's okay.
I'm not crazy about the word enough. I don't think it's enough.
Yeah, exactly. I get that. Anyway, that was an awesome tangent. I love that. So we've solved the problem of fear and celebration. So
I'd love to solve the problem of fear in general, but podcast isn't long enough. And I have my own fear. I look fear in the face, and I'm scared all the time about something.
Well, yeah. So let's talk about that, because I imagine that's part of your process. And you started to say that when people come to you, a lot of times it's a lot of fear. So what are the fears about usually, and how do you guide people through facing and moving through that fear?
Yeah, that's actually what we dissect, because when people actually do take a look at it and speak their fears out, they typically sound not so bad. Just facing the monster is very helpful, and choosing something different. They can choose how to move through life. Like I said, they can choose who to be. You can choose who to be in the next minute, and it can be a little different than it was a minute ago. So really doing some mindfulness work and some writing. It depends on the person. Everybody's so different. There's some people, if you ask them to journal something, they would throw up. So everybody's so different in how they want to process things. And quite often, though, people who journal do come up with a lot. And there's even, the Julia Cameron books on journaling. I can point people that way.
The Artist's Way.
I love her books. Yes. And so it's just meeting them where they are, seeing what they need, where they need to go, and what works for them, because everybody's so different. But we do look it in the face. I think that's the key, is being mindful and looking it in the face. And can they come up with, say, a meditation practice? Could they work out? I find meditation is the biggest help, but not if it's going to be something that if people are extremely critical in that mode, they have a hard time meditating. And if they have a hard time meditating, then they have something else to be critical about. So really working with them on that meditation practice, and working with them on accepting every single thing that goes through their brain while they're meditating. It's all okay.
What kind of meditation do you work on with folks?
It depends on the people, again. So I've been at times, I'll speak for myself in life, where I have to have guided meditation, because I can't even slow my brain down enough to just sit by myself. It's too busy. So it helps to have somebody else speaking to me, somebody else guiding me. And then everybody's different on time. Some people, 2 minutes would be a huge success. And then we work our way up. So it's mindfulness. It's guided if they want guided. If some people like to repeat a mantra, they write out their own mantra and repeat it and repeat it. Some can do, I do myself, I do yoga music and just let it go and then have some mantras going at the same time. And again, time is what they can do.
The GenX Shift is brought to you by Life from the Summit, which is my company where I provide one-on-one support for Gen Xers who are navigating any type of transition. Look, I started the podcast because I wanted to support y'all through whatever type of shift you're trying to make in life. And I know from personal experience that it often helps to have individualized one-on-one support to make it through those shifts. I know that I wouldn't have been able to quit my job as an attorney and start my own business if it hadn't been for the support of my own coach. So if you're a Gen Xer who's maybe trying to shift your career, find your purpose in life, figure out what really matters to you, maybe figure out how you're going to save for retirement, how you're going to take care of both your parents and your kids at the same time, whatever shift it is that you're trying to move through, let me know how I could support you. I have programs and packages that I can custom tailor for your needs and that will allow you to figure out what's really important to you. How can you find your own inner compass to navigate through these transitions? So check out the website at lifefromthesummit.com or send me an email at podcast@lifefromthesummit and let me know that you're interested. Podcast listeners receive special discounts on all of my programs.
And
the real key, it sounds like the real key is regardless of what the practice is or the modality or the way of meditating, the real key is to be able to regulate yourself and sort of observe, put some distance between you and the fear, not in a way that you're resisting it or disassociating from it, but so that you're really not identifying with the fear, which I think is so easy to do. People, myself included, we get so wrapped up in the fear of, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to pay my bills. And what if I can't get business? What if I can't, live the life I want in retirement? But all the things, right? And we start to identify with that fear. And if we can start to implement some type of meditation practice, we can start to hold that fear with a little more lightness. So I think that's really awesome that you meet people where they are.
But yes, just holding it.
Yeah.
And even seeing it as we fight, anything we resist persists, right? So if we're going to sit there and fight our fear, it's not going to go away. So I think this is basically what you said, but I lost part of it.
Yep.
Was being with it, the be with exercise, just be with it. And it's not good and it's not bad. Also getting away from that judgment of what's right and what's wrong and what's good and what's bad and what's black and what's white. That helps.
Trying to minimize, because I think it's very difficult to get rid of judgment completely for us normal Westerners. But if we can start to decrease the judgment a little bit or see where the judgment is getting in our way and recognize that the judgment is subjective. The judgments are just stories. The stories are based on how we grew up, our patterns and practices and ways of being. And all of that at the end of the day is not true. Just because we can think it doesn't mean it's true. And so starting to see where the judgment is really getting in our way and contributing to our fear. Before we kind of move into the big topic of transitioning to retirement, in the clients that you're getting coming to you, how much are you seeing of people who want to maybe switch into a different career or start their own business because they're not really ready for retirement yet?
Actually, quite a lot. And quite often it is start their own business, which I can help with because, not that it's about me and not that coaching ever is about my experience, although I have started, I've owned and operated a fitness studio for 5 years. So I've done that brick and mortar service business as well as from home coaching business. So I get that nuance. And I actually forget what you asked.
It's okay.
Wait,
please,
how
you're
many
in
people
the safe space.
How many people do I get?
Yes. Welcome to my world. Yes, we were both there. Like the mind just goes blank.
Well, I was like criticizing myself for going off into my own story, which really has nothing to do with coaching, because I will say once again, coaching has nothing to do with the coach. It has everything to do with you and your experience, or the client and their experience. So I do, I haven't gotten many this time around. I did work at a place where people had lost their jobs, a city agency, probably 5 years ago. And those were all people who were just looking, quite often just saying, oh my God, I got to do something different. I can't do this anymore. I can't go back to the same thing. So that, and then quite often people of retirement age and younger, of course, but people like you, younger, and people of retirement age actually don't want to retire to nothing. They want to start their own business. And a lot of them are going into coaching and consulting. So I have somebody younger, probably 30s or maybe early 40s, just having to change it up for various reasons, lost the last job and just absolutely does not want to go into the same thing. So helping them reposition. People are amazing. And I love that I was trained as a coactive coach, because people have their own answers. And it's not that we coaches sit there and go, whoa, what do you think of that? That's not it. But we do have some generative questions, and we do have such a love and compassion for people that we will help them tease out their own answer. I don't know your answers. I don't know any of my clients' answers, nor would I claim to. But watching them, sometimes I'm shocked, and this probably happens to you, Michele. You're working with somebody and all of a sudden they came up with an answer that wow, like you just totally opened up your whole life, and I didn't see that one coming. So it's pretty exciting when you can really kick back and be that. We're partners. We're just really partners with people.
Yeah.
Very fun to
And
watch.
it's so exciting. And I find that it's hard for people to understand what coaches are and what they do, which that can be a whole podcast in of itself.
Yes.
Because a lot of people, I think initially, when they come to me at least, they have the perception of coaches, because there are people out there who are coaches that aren't trained in the code of ethics under the International Coach Federation, like we are, that they tell people what to do. And I think that's sort of the impression of what coaches are. Well, I'm just going to go find a coach and they'll tell me what to do.
That's a consultant.
We ain't telling you what to do.
No,
Yeah.
that's a consultant.
Yeah.
I think we tend to be more intuitive, and we're able to go to good questions for them. We tend to be very empathetic. We tend to be intuitive, and we're able to like I say, tease their fabulousness out.
Yep. Because that's what's sustainable for people. We could tell you what to do.
Yep.
But that's not going to create a repeatable, sustainable process for you the next time this comes down the road. We want you to, exactly.
I mean, they know what they should do. Quite often they know what they should do. And I always say, stop shitting all over yourself. But like, you know how to lose weight. Okay. I know exactly how to do it. Do I do it? No. But if you kind of tease out of me what I would like to have in the long run, what I would like to see in the long run of myself, what I would like to feel, what I'd really like to feel, maybe I'll figure out a way to do it. I don't have an answer for you.
Yeah. So let's come back to transition, pun intended, back to the process that you use, whether you're talking about people who are trying to make a career shift or people who are moving toward retirement, and then we'll get into the retirement piece. But I want to make sure that we sort of tie up the loose end of the process that you started talking about, because we have the sort of first step of recognizing the end and celebrating the end and creating some rituals around that. What else is involved in your process overall? And I know that varies by individual, but in shepherding people through transition.
Right. Well, especially transition, as I said, start out with that, do something to help complete the ending somewhat. An ending's never completely completed. I mean, if we're talking about mourning somebody, there is no end to mourning. It goes on the rest of our lives. So it just ebbs and flows, and we have to give it respect that it's going to have a process that we're a little bit out of control of. Mourning pops up, as you know, Michele. I'm sure you've run into this. You're just bopping along your day thinking, I'm doing pretty good today, and whambo, upside the head, you start bawling in a grocery store. Having the absolute grace for that, and grace for yourself, and accepting that that's part of the process, accepting that ending is a big deal. It's a big deal. And sometimes we're not in the freaking mood to accept it. But that being aware of that is key. So from that ending, moving to what William Bridges calls it the messy middle. And I actually like to call it the miraculous middle, because as we're processing, there's so much that goes on. We're humans. We want to just go get the new beginning and make it work and make it be the perfect thing that we planned. It just doesn't work that way. If we can accept the fact that it's going to be a process, I always say we move in a zigzag fashion. If we're not, the only thing we can do wrong to ourselves is not move, is to sit and binge watch, Ted Lasso, which I have done.
Yeah.
So,
nothing wrong with that, but yeah.
No, it's wrong. Nothing wrong. You need your downtime. But, not moving is where you're going to get yourself. But as long as you are moving at just put a little foot out and dip your toe out. It's scary. You're now in the area of not knowing. And humans hate limbo. We call it the liminal space. I call it limbo because I was raised Catholic. Limbo. We hate it. We hate it. We absolutely freak out in limbo. We do not like change. We do not like that whole phase of the middle. And the messy middle is pretty much all of it. Again, the miraculous middle, because I've watched people zig and zag. And with every zig and zag, you end up learning something new about yourself, learning something new about where you want to go. So working out that process with people. And some people are very linear and they want me to give them worksheets so they can work on their vision and their mission and their next steps in life. And they want it neat. And there's those. And then there's people that want to process it audibly to me, that just want to talk it through each week. Okay, this is what I did and this is what I found out. I don't think I want to do that anymore. And that's okay. We can't know what we want to do until we know what we don't want to do, right? We can't know what we don't want to do until we take a few steps and dip a few toes. So I would say, as long as you're not hurting anybody or yourself, just keep trying. Just keep trying. And there's going to be days you don't want to. So take a day off. There's no rules. There's no absolutes here. So just depending on the severity or the size of whatever their transition is, depends on the speed of which we move through, which they move through, I should say.
Yeah. That sounds like a really empowering process. And one of the big takeaways I have from that is, even from the people who want to move in a linear fashion, we have to accept that change is not linear. Or maybe the better way to say that is, our transition and movement through change isn't linear. It may feel linear, especially if you're talking about an involuntary change, like boom, somebody died. That's a very linear change that happened. Our movement through that, though, is not linear. It's not get me from A to B. There's going to be a lot of little hiccups and zigzags, as you said, along the way. So I really appreciate you pointing that out. And that's how you really hold people and provide that guidance for them to be able to weather those zigzags, and to have the patience to sit in that limbo and know that we're still moving. Yeah.
Know that it's okay. That it's all okay.
Yeah.
And,
so let's.
Yeah, go ahead. There's a
no, that's okay. Go ahead.
I was going to say that sometimes a new beginning isn't the be all end all either. It's not just a beginning that's going to end everything. You're still working things out, and you're still processing, and you're still changing. There's some people in retirement, especially, who have told me, they're kind of mad at themselves, been retired for a year, and it's like, I did everything. Now I'm bored. Now I got to figure out something else. Well, that's okay. Figure out something. We'll work together and figure out something else. Well, maybe I want to consult, or maybe I want to do this. Awesome. Let's figure it out. But people get down on themselves when they make a plan and then don't follow it perfectly, or don't do what they told everybody else they were going to do. It just doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. Learn from it.
Grace. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Get the feedback and learn from it, and then adjust as needed.
Exactly. And maybe that was the year you needed to plant tomatoes, That's fine. That's totally fine. But it didn't sustain you for any longer. And that now next, yay, you get to reinvent.
Yep, exactly. So let's move into that big topic of retirement. And I know that you have this is kind of one of your specialties. And actually, you have a free download for folks, which is a wheel on your website that has different areas of retirement, different categories to kind of work with as folks are transitioning to retirement. So tell us a little bit about the wheel and the categories for people to think about as they're moving toward retirement.
Oh, fun. Yeah, my wheel. It's on my website at suzannecampi.com, and that'll be in the show notes. I find that people come to me, again, I get some people referred to me from financial planners, and the financial planners took care of the financial piece. It's not me at all. You don't want me messing with your finances. 100%.
No.
I couldn't even do simple math. But anyway, I find that people don't realize how much else there is to look at. They think, oh, I got finances. They stop working one day and then they're going. But there's so much depth here. There's so many places to go. And as I said, there's so many people to be. You get to be the best version of yourself. I feel like my dad got to kind of reinvent, because he retired. He was one of those 50s dad that literally never spoke 2 words, never spoke. And then he got to be a really fun, sweet grandfather. So he got to reinvent. And if he hadn't lived the rest of those years, we never would have known him as that sweet guy. So there's reinvention that can really happen, even an old curmudgeon like my dad. So, on that wheel, we have that spiritual time, the spiritual self. What do you want to do spiritually? It seems like a lot of people are getting a little deeper, more into their soul. And maybe that's just the circles I swim in. I don't know. But I find people speaking a little more introspectively these days, even older people, which surprises me. Even some of my siblings, are going a little deeper. And we weren't raised doing that. In the religion we were raised in, we weren't raised to go that deep within ourselves, right? So that's
Nope.
a whole new thing. That could be a whole new chapter. And it's not woo-woo. It's not, don't be afraid. It's just fun to get to know yourself a little more. And once you know yourself, you get to be more to the people around you. And they really enjoy that. So one of those spots is spiritual, and it's whatever it is for you. It could be a church, it could be a mountaintop, it could be anything. It's so personal. And then family and friends, how are you going to honor that? Where have you been with family? Have you been kind of ignoring them and pushing them aside because you've been so busy working? It might be time to rekindle that relationship, if it's with kids or grandkids, friends. A lot of, especially men, what I see is men didn't nurture their friends because they were working and they had the wife and kids or whatever they had, the family they had. They were head down work. They didn't nurture. We women tend to nurture our friendships more. It's just kind of a fact if we were to look at the numbers across the board. So what about nurturing those friends, finding new friends? It's important because all the studies show that the people that live longest have those strong friendships, have those strong social bonds, whether it's friends, family, and you need them all. You need them all. Can't just rely on the family, so find friends. Partnership and love, where has that relationship been? If you are partnered, have you been nurturing that relationships? I've had people that come to me and said, I don't want to retire. I don't want to be alone with my husband the rest of my life. Well, it's something you might want to take a deeper dive into. Maybe that's a therapy thing. That's definitely not a coach thing. But what are you going to do to take that relationship wherever it needs to go? Who knows? Health and fitness is huge. And you had somebody on recently who spoke about that. And I love that podcast. I think she was well into her 40s and she went, oh my God, I've got to get my shit together on my health and fitness. We may have let that go through our older years. It can come back. It can absolutely come back. We can bring it back. Might not be fun or easy, but with the right partnership. I do tend to partner with people on this because, as I mentioned, I did own a fitness studio and I've been a personal trainer for a million years. I love the human body. I love what makes it tick. I love health and wellness. So it's a fun topic for me, actually. But but people can go to any, there's so much support out there now for holistic wealth or health, wealth too, but for holistic health and how to make it a lifestyle. We can't just do that diet thing anymore. It's a lifestyle. It goes deeper. It goes with how much you honor yourself and your body and how long you want to stick around, because you can have all the money and all these other things on the wheel in the world, but if you don't have your health and fitness, well, health and fitness are the same because they go hand in hand. And fun. How about fun, play, and travel is one of them. We can have fun. We forgot how to have fun, I was thinking about this the other day, or I guess it was a couple of weeks ago when I was talking about fun, and somebody asked me, I love this question, what did you do for fun when you were 8? What did you do for fun? Well, it's a fun thing to think about. First of all, we ran around in the neighborhood full speed. I loved hula hooping, so I actually bought a hula hoop.
Yeah.
And I swear to God,
That's awesome.
When you bring out a hula hoop to a bunch of grown-ups, first of all, they look at you like you just lost it. And then they get this huge smile, and then they try it. They cannot not try it. And I told you, the podcast I was listening to with the chiropractor you had on, she was talking about, we used to pogo stick. And I'm like, oh my God, we used to pogo stick. I think might be a little afraid of that one right now, but hula
hoop is making a comeback. I feel like in the last several years.
Well, we didn't have them at the gym when I owned the gym.
Well, I just see a lot of people. I have a friend, actually, I went to go visit in Vermont a few years ago, and her daughter had been learning to hula hoop, and she and I got the hula hoop out, and I'm like, this is hard.
It's really hard. It's really hard. Yeah, I have a secret. Get the weighted one. They're a little more they got weight behind them because it's easier.
Yeah.
It's easier. And it feels like it's carving your waist out. I don't think it is, but
it's more of a workout.
Yeah.
I recently, like in the last couple of years, I found my old baton from when I was little. And I actually hated taking baton lessons when I was little. My mom made me do it, and I hated it. But now I love it, and I wish I would have embraced it more back then. And so I kind of wish I would have kept up at it, because to be a real, I don't know if they call them twirlers or batoners or whatever.
No, you'd have to tell me.
Amazing. And you can take,
yes.
Yeah, like take staff classes. I mean, they're so cool. So I do get out my baton and I play with it in the backyard.
You go, girl.
And try not to kill myself by hitting myself in the head with it. But I love
That's awesome.
That invitation for fun and play, because I think so many people wait for their life to begin when they retire. They work their ass off for 20 or 30 or 40 years thinking, well, when I retire, I'm going to have so much fun. And then by that time, you're too freaking tired to go do anything. And we don't know how to have fun in this country. We don't know how to play. We need to bring play and imagination back into our daily life. And we don't want to keep saying to ourselves, when I retire, then I will have fun. Have fun now. Yes, still have fun in retirement, but have fun now too, so that you really know how to have fun in your retirement, and you don't feel like you're making up for all of those lost years of not having fun. So, I didn't count how many categories that was on your wheel. Oh, we do. Okay, I couldn't remember if we were done yet. Okay, what are the rest?
The next one is curiosity, learning, and growth. I kind of put them all into one, but stay curious. That's another thing that's going to make us really leave a nice legacy and be a good example to the next generations, is how we retire. If our grandkids are watching us, I don't have any, but if the younger generations are watching us and we're playing and we're traveling, you're out in your camper van, your Mercedes van, and we're being fun and curious and festive and light. Look what we teach people, We teach the younger generation how to be an older person instead of teaching them the older people are cranky and slow moving and whatnot. I mean, we might slow a little, but we got to be fun. Dang, I've seen some slow old folks that are freaking fun. So we have to keep up, and the curiosity is huge. Remain curious. That makes you interesting and
or get curious in the first place. I feel like so many people, curiosity is sort of a lost art, and it is an art. Just I love that curiosity piece. Yeah.
Yeah. once again, it goes back to neurons that fire together, wire together. If we're not curious about new things and things going on, we're just going to turn into that myopic old person.
Yep.
So
Yep.
don't keep going down the same lane of neurons. We've got to stay interesting. And then the last one is legacies. Oh, I guess I do have finance in there, but that's not my piece, but I have to have it in there. And then there's legacy who, what are we going to do as a legacy? Do we want to leave some things to other people for their lives to be together or to be better? Again, a legacy can be pure joy. We might want to leave pure joy in our family and friends. So legacy, it's interesting. Everybody's very different on that piece. Everybody's very different on all of them, but some had never thought, geez, what am I going to leave? And it's not just monetary.
No.
I think of my dad. He left just lovely values and morals and a lovely line of human beings behind. So there's all different versions of legacy.
Do you find that there are one or two of those categories on the wheel that are sort of the biggest issues or stumbling blocks for people?
I unfortunately have seen health be a big one, a little too much. And it is worrisome that people have not been moving and they look at exercise as something they did when they were younger. And it's about getting out there moving. That one's concerning to me, that it's just on large scale, that people, they don't see it as something they can affect this at this age. And it's so not true. I always tell them about I had a client, Mary, when I owned the gym. I had her from the time she was 93 to about 98. And she came every summer because she would she came back every winter because she spent the summer in New York and she'd come back. She didn't have a gym that took her there. We took her because, oh God, she was a love. And she knew how to work out because she had been a physical therapist. So she walked in, shoulders back, ramrod straight, because she never wanted to be hunched over old lady. So she was a physical therapist. She knew how to work out. And it was slow go at her age, but she got in there 3 days a week and did it. And I watched her from the time she'd come in after she'd been in New York for 3 months. She had lost her balance. She had lost a lot, but she would sit there and work until she got it back. And every year, 97, 98, her muscle tone came back, her balance came back to some degree. So you can never tell me you're too late, you're too old. Because I got Mary. I got a story for you. So, and then
I'm so glad you shared her story.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. My absolute joy. And and the curiosity and the play are probably two that are out of the box. And people don't realize how young it will keep them. And it's not that we don't have to fight age, and I'm not an anti-ager by any means, but dang, we got it. We got a last chance at being freaking fun and being curious and reading. Oh my gosh, learning. There's so much to learn. I feel like getting one of those bumper stickers that says, too many podcasts, too little time,
There's only like 5 million some podcasts. You got all the time in the world. That's okay. I really appreciate your philosophy and your process, especially with this wheel around retirement, because I feel like there's sort of two ends of the spectrum on this, and then, people that fall anywhere on the spectrum in between. But the two opposite ends of the spectrum are those people who have been spending decades planning and saving for retirement, and so they actually sucked the joy those decades out of the present moment. Yeah. And then there are the people like me and like a lot of Gen Xers who are like, retirement, that might as well be like a 4-letter word. I don't even know what retirement is. I'm just going to work until I die. And at least for me, retirement has a very heavy feel to it. And it's mostly wrapped up in the financial piece. So what I really appreciate for people like me and for people at the other end of the spectrum is to look at retirement as a more holistic approach and philosophy, that it's not just about the money piece, that you really want to look at what is your whole life going to be. Not just can you support the lifestyle that you want with your bank account, but are you going to be healthy enough to live that lifestyle? Is that lifestyle going to allow you to stay curious and keep learning? Is it going to foster the legacy that you want to have, all those different pieces of the wheel. So I find that wheel and your approach to be very freeing for me in terms of how I look at retirement. And I hope other folks feel the same way about it too.
Oh, thank you, Michelle.
Um,
Another thing
something
too.
that,
Oh, sorry.
no, go ahead.
My train of thought. Retirement. You said that about the word is interesting because I didn't realize, that the younger generations were thinking of that too. It's a heavy word. It's a financial word. It's a
Yeah.
stopping and sitting on an easy chair word. I like the word repurpose because
Oh,
it's a reinvention. It's a repurposing. So I love the repurposing verb.
I like that. I think I want to step into a different word than retirement because, and I talk to clients and people about this all the time, not to be nitpicky about our words, and let's be a little more conscious and curious about the words we're using, because if the words we're using don't feel good to us, that's like we're constantly digging a little tiny wound in us every time we use that word. So if retirement doesn't feel good for you, like it doesn't feel good for me, let's think of another word. And I love that word repurpose, reinvent, actually, I think sounds and feels a little better for me. Like next chapter, reinvention. What's that look like?
It's
recharging.
Like plugging in your battery, recharging it
Yes.
in a different direction. Because we're doing it differently than our parents. And I always say baby boomers, we have kind of paved the way. I mean, we were the hippies, or the older ones were. And as one fellow boomer said, we created sex, drugs, and rock and roll. What are you talking about?
That's true.
We paved the way. And one thing we paved the way for too, which we're bringing you along with us, is that we're retiring differently. Our parents, I know my dad retired to hang out. He didn't really think, oh, I'm going to go do something next. And that's the way it was back then. And quite often it's because they were retiring from a physical job. They were exhausted. They were beat up.
Yeah.
So that's how that came to be. Now we're reinventing. Very few people do I know that are my peers are thinking, I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to sit. No, I'm going to sit on my easy chair. Everybody wants a plan. Everybody wants to do something interesting and be somebody interesting. So that's a difference. And you guys are right there with us. You're like, well, and it's partially financial, but not completely financial. I see it in both people with a lot of money and people without.
Yeah. And I think when you can look at retirement in this more holistic way, as you've done, it can help ease the fear that we talked about. Because just speaking from my own experience and other people I know, there's a lot of fear about retiring because people think I'm not going to be able to retire because I haven't saved up enough money, or I'm not going to be able to have the lifestyle I want because I don't have enough money. Like, it's all about the fear around money.
Yes.
And coming back to our discussion earlier about being able to change our relationship to fear and maybe use fear as a little bit of a motivator instead of a paralyzer, let's look more holistically at retirement in all of these areas, and where might you be doing a little bit better in one area than the financial area, and how can you tune into that area a little bit more, and B, how can you use that fear maybe to help motivate you a little bit more now to start thinking differently about the financial piece of that retirement. There's a piece I wanted to come back to too, not necessarily one of the categories of the wheel, but you and I had talked in our pre-call about what you're seeing, especially with women who have been on the professional track most of their life, and how hard of a transition retirement is for them because they don't know what to do with themselves outside of the identity that they have built in their successful corporate career. So how do you work with women who are afraid that when they retire, they're going to lose their identity as a successful corporate professional?
Yeah, we did talk about that. I'm glad you brought it up. This is a big one, and it's not just women. It happens with men as well. But I happen to work with the majority of women, so this is where I'm seeing it so greatly, is women that I do work with are typically, SVP, VP, SVP, and in the C-suite. And they are so afraid about going out in the world without that identity. What happens if when I leave Friday and I retire, who am I on Monday? Because especially as women, we tend to get a little less visible in our 50s. We've all experienced standing at a bar, not getting waited on, when they grab somebody younger, we've experienced it all. Oh gosh, I had one recently and I'm like, oh, well, sitting at a restaurant, never having the waiter come because you're sitting there alone type thing. And, so you start noticing that, and I'm never one that wants to dwell on anything like that or even believe it, but I'm afraid it happens, people. So, they know that their identity 100% is wrapped in that job because it's not going to happen out in public. Men get away with a little more out in public because they have more of a command presence quite often, and people tend to cater a little more to them. So not to completely generalize here, but my women clients are scared to death of losing that identity. And one of them who moved away from the area said, nobody asked what I did, which is really weird. Nobody even asked what I did. And she wants to drop it on them. She wants to tell them what company she was a VP at, Nobody cares. Quite often, nobody. So it's not only the being invisible in public, but it's now you'll get out into a pickleball circle. Well, nobody's going to ask what you did. And now you're just a pickleballer, right? Which I wish I was, but my knee gave me a bad time. So anyway, it's identity with women. It's the seas parted when I walked into a room before, and that's not going to happen again. So really, really working with them on taking a look at who they are once again, because they were always more than that corporate identity. So who were they? And who do they want to be? And where are they going to step forward to where that's not going to matter a lot. It's not going to matter as much as they think. But I can't tell them that up front because everyone has come back to me and went, oh, yeah, I really find not being the SVP anymore. But it's a fear ahead of time, and we want to work on it. So
it seems like it's really at the root of it. It's that self-worth, which again comes back to that word enough, like that, what I call like not enoughness. That if somebody has spent decades, and this is why a lot of us get into the careers and stay in the careers that we've had, is because our identity is so wrapped up in that, because we think that's what validates us as human beings in our existence, right?
Right.
And the real like next level Jedi move is to be able to understand that I'm worthy, I'm enough without my job title. It doesn't matter what my job title is, what my career is. Doesn't have anything to do with my worth as a human being. 100%. And that, for people who haven't done that work, to be coming and doing that work when they're getting close to retirement, that's a huge identity shift. That's a lot of unlearning, rewiring that has to happen at that stage. So what do you find has been most helpful to support women in making that identity shift and realizing that their worth isn't wrapped up in their career?
Right. That's so huge. You said it so well. And again, it's really backing up and seeing that you've been looking for that external validation, and that's what's been driving you. And it's pretty evolved to go inward. Now it's a big identity shift to go from, in a way, who cares what title you were, but you do, and you have, and you've been getting that external validation, and you've had the room silence when you start to talk. And that's what's been going on. So taking a look at the fact that's what's been going on, this is where the part of the wheel turns a little spiritual, is now you're going to go within. Now you're going to be. And who are you going to be? And how are you going to value yourself? Because really our value is only here. It's only in our heart and soul. It's nowhere out there. And all along that's been working for us. But time to take a little kickback and see that we're taking a look at who we are now. And that could be scary. I find people are frightened of that. They're a little afraid of who they're going to find or something. But I swear there's nobody bad lurking around that corner.
It's sort of similar to the people you mentioned earlier about the people who are afraid when they retire, what's going to happen to my marriage if I'm spending more time with this person. It's a little similar. It's like, what's going to happen to me if I'm now forced to spend time with myself? Yeah. I don't have my career to fall back on.
Oh, people,
we got to get real about those kinds of relationships to other people and to ourselves.
Yes. And you can keep running and hiding, but it's not going to serve you very well. And it's going to make you sick. So I'm just such a firm believer that if we don't take that look inside and we're not congruent with our soul, and if you had stayed an attorney in that office, you'd probably have yourself sick by now with something. And
I honestly would.
It's no joke.
No doubt in my mind, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you right now. I mean, for a very bad reason. Like like it would have killed me if I'd stayed in that role. And interestingly enough, I think that for me, and I'm wondering if this is true for some other people too, as we get older, like, because I so didn't identify with being an attorney, like I had no trouble setting aside that attorney hat whatsoever, that even that was a little discombobulating, because I thought, well, if I haven't figured out, I think I was about 47 when I started thinking about not being an attorney, and then 49 when I quit. If I hadn't figured out by the time I was in my mid 40s who I am, like, what now? Like, how am I going to start to figure that out now? And I think the message here is that it's never too late to start to figure out who you really are, and to really step into that self-worth.
You're never going to stop evolving. Right. Nothing's wrong with timing. Time's an illusion, right? Nothing's wrong with the fact there was some reason you were supposed to do that for that amount of time. I'm kind of simplistic that way. You were supposed to do that because your next step is going to be great because of it. And you're going to enjoy the next step that much more because of what you did before.
Yeah.
So it's just...
Well, and I kind of wonder too, I think this is one of the ways that the younger generations, millennials and Gen Xers, have a bit of a leg up on, or millennials and Gen Zers, not Gen Xers, have a little bit of a leg up on the Gen Xers and boomers, is that boomers and Gen Xers were very loyal. We wanted to pick a career and stay with it for the most part, which is why I think it's really challenging for a lot of us when we get into those, quote, midlife, which who knows what the hell that really is. But we get into like our 40s and beyond, and we start to question our careers. That becomes so challenging. For the younger generations, they're very much career hoppers, job hoppers.
That's a really good point.
They're much more flexible and adaptable, and they're like, well, I'm going to stay here for a couple years and then go try something else. We did not do that.
And we travel for
very much identified. Yeah, exactly. So I think that's where they've really taken up that gauntlet for the better and run with that. And I think that we older generations could take a cue from that adaptability and flexibility in terms of, let's not identify ourselves so much with our career and our job to the point that it is making us sick.
So well put, Michele. I mean, my son is 36 and he just switched from working at LinkedIn as somewhat of an analyst. And he went back to nursing school and he's now a nurse. No fear
That's awesome.
whatsoever. Just do it. And when he did it, I mean, I thought, oh God, he's not going to do this. Please tell me he's got a good job. Why? Mom, I'm not changing the world. I'm not changing anybody, helping anybody's life sitting here working at LinkedIn. And I'm like, I can't argue with that. But I just thought, oh God, what's he going to do? What's he going to do? But he did it. He pulled it off. And it was 6-year road to get it all done, but he did it. And I agree. You know what? There's one thing they realized, I think, too. They watch all these layoffs. They watch their parents get laid off, as he watched when he was younger, too. And they realize there's no loyalty. So why go be loyal to a company if the company's not going to be loyal to you? There's zero loyalty. So if it's not going to work both ways, you might as well just do what you want. I agree with you. I admire that. Sometimes they scare me a little bit, but I admire it. They, go off and travel by myself, for a year. I've seen that so many times. I interviewed young people who were just back. Where are you back from? Oh, Thailand, Cambodia, Africa, South America. I hit 12 continents. I'm like, God, I admire that. And it's gotten to the point where it's not a bad mark on a resume even anymore.
No, it's I think it is admired, because I think, and there aren't a lot of, I don't really think there's anything in my life I would say I regret. But, if I had some do-overs, I might have some do-overs. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I would do is I would not go straight to college and straight to law school. I would travel, because I think those experiences are so important for helping you figure out who you are, for seeing the world, for being exposed to different people, different cultures, different languages, all of diversity. and really kind of growing up and growing into yourself as an authentic person. And I feel like I and a lot of people of our generations were sort of cheated out of that because we got that message of you finish high school and you go to college and that's not enough. You got to go on and get another professional degree so that you can really then go make yourself miserable for decades making money to try and pay off your student loans from all of that school. Right? Like,
it's so true. It's so absurd. It's so absurd.
It is absurd.
You have a friend whose daughter said she wants to travel. She just finished college and wants to travel. He is going through absolute conniption fits. He just so upset. His wife has to talk him off a limb, and well, I guess she's going to have this as a stop-off place. And it's not that he doesn't want her at his house. He's just petrified that she won't be able to get a job if she takes a year off. I'm like, let her go.
It's not true.
Go. Oh my God. Yes, we can. All the generations can learn from one another so greatly, huh?
Yeah. Absolutely. If you can zero in, if possible, on one key, what do you think the key is to being able to move through transition with more ease and success?
I think the key is awareness. Awareness that it's a process, and awareness that you're not alone. Awareness you have help out there. So it's an awareness and a mindfulness. Just being aware and mindful that it's actually not an overnight thing. Process is always the process for a reason. And that God, be easy on yourself. Just have some compassion. Self-compassion is everything. And I probably say that because it's what I struggle with the most. So it might be very self-serving.
Me too.
But self-compassion. Oh my gosh, if we all had a little more self-compassion, it'd be wonderful.
The world would be better for it.
Yeah, and then hire Michele and Suzanne to help you.
Exactly. Which, by the way, so I was going to say as we're talking, and I think we'll have to coordinate after this. I think it would just be awesome to collaborate on some things with each other because I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
So much.
Yeah. And I wanted to ask you too, just in terms of your process. So what kind of programs do you have available for people if they want to work with you?
Well, I never really know how to answer that question, Michele, so don't put this on. And you just froze. So I so meet people where they are. Okay, I'm back. I so meet people where they are, and I find that I cannot take any kind of cookie cutter process and make it work for everybody. So it's going to be where they are, what they need, how long they want to meet, how much transformation, or how big their situation is. We can do a 4-week start end if they want. I don't know if they'll get everything out of it, but quite typically, I will say I work with people 6 months. Usually it's 6 months, but sometimes it goes longer. Sometimes I'm their check-in buddy, that they want to check in with me once every couple months after that. We do bond quite a bit. So everybody's different. And like I said, if they're the type that want actual action items, worksheets, I got them, and we'll work them through a process. But what we're really getting to is them taking a whole new look at who they are and how they want to move forward. It's not what they want to do as much as who they are.
I deeply appreciate that and am a big believer in that too. And I know we hear a lot, excuse me, in the marketing world of you got to have just one offer and it's a take it or leave it kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And I don't believe in that either. I like to tailor things more to people, to where they are and what's going to work for them and their schedules and how their brains work and all of that. So I appreciate that approach.
How deep they want to go. I mean, I'm not a therapist. I'm not going to go back. One thing about coaches is we take you and move you forward. We take you from where you are and move you forward. Whereas therapists go back. And if you want to go back, we'll get you a therapist, recommend a therapist or such. We're not going to go back and pick apart your past. We're going to take you from where you are now, brand new you, and move you forward.
Well, I encourage folks to go download the wheel that you have, if for no other reason, to get you thinking more holistically about retirement and not just the financial piece of it. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you want to highlight or bring up before we move into the lightning round and where folks can find you?
Round. I cannot think of anything else right now, but if I have all the way through the lightning round to think about it.
Yeah, that's true.
I feel like we could go on.
Absolutely.
We could take any tangent and do a whole nother podcast.
I think we might have to go back and listen to some of those tangents and come up with another podcast episode, because there's some
I agree.
juiciness in those.
And I want to double down on that fear one, because it's funny, because I hadn't thought about it in a while. But when people realize how much they're run by fear, it's an eye opener. It's a real eye
Oh,
opener.
yes.
And it comes back. Yep. I'm sorry, but I'm a fan of Eckhart Tolle. He bores the living heck out of a lot of people. But he's so appropriate. Just if we could only just settle into now, everything's perfect.
100%. I just, like, breathes a sigh of relief listening to that. Because I think with fear, and we might have to do a whole episode on talking about fear. But I was just talking with another friend of mine the other day in London. She's also a coach, Christina Lord. She was on the podcast for a couple episodes talking about parental loss and grief. And she and I were talking the other day because we both love neuroscience and how the brain works. And I think if people could just at least have this little seed planted for them to know that, because we live in a society and a time right now where we all have an elevated baseline of fear that we are not meant to function in. Our bodies, our systems are not meant to live in a baseline of fear 24/7. And what that does is that it activates the amygdala. Our nervous system is put into a survival mode so that we are constantly in a bit of an elevated survival mode, like always kind of like where's the danger? And what that does is cut off our ability to tap into the executive function in our brain. So if you're wondering why I can't kind of figure out how to get through this, I don't see all the options. If you're not able to tap into your body, there's a neurological reason for that. And so for folks just to start to think about the role that fear might be playing, an unsupportive role in their life, especially when it comes to making a transition, that might be a good starting place and a good jumping off point for us to do another podcast episode.
You literally freeze, and you literally get, they say working with blinders on, you get peripheral vision. Your vision narrows and you can't see right or left. So when I know a few times I've gotten scared, and I mean, having my own business, I am kind of scared part of the time, but when I'm stressed out, I have zero, you can't tap into creativity. It doesn't exist, because that was not a survival tactic back in the day. So you literally, your eyes narrow, your focus narrows, you got nothing. You got nothing in the tank. Nothing.
Got nothing.
So, yeah, nothing.
All right, well, let's move into the lightning round, which I do adapt for my non-GenX guests. And the first question is, what's your fondest boomer childhood memory?
I think, it's very funny, because I think it was very similar to some of the podcasts I've heard from you, and it's racing around the neighborhoods, racing around. We literally, I swear we were full bore. And this was like the steep hill we lived on. We were just running all the time. And then we would let the ball go when we were playing kickball and have to run all the way down, run back up. Just kind of that fearless abandon of racing around. That it was just kind of pure. I feel kind of bad that the kids don't have that as much now. I guess unless they're raised way out in the woods. I know I had a dear neighbor who moved his kids back to Kentucky, where they would have all the land and the tractors and the play. So just that fearless abandon.
That's cool. Freedom. Fearless abandon. Yep. Freedom. We need more fearless abandon in good ways, not in irresponsible ways, in good ways. Right. What is your biggest piece of advice for Gen Xers going through transition?
It's pretty much what I said before, which was stay mindful. Just know you're not alone. Know that the only thing constant in life is change. So to try not to freak out about it too much, which is so much easier said than done. I understand that. But this too shall pass. Get support. That's one thing I think you've mentioned it on your podcast. And I know we were revered for doing stuff alone, for not bringing anybody in on our pain. Absolutely revered for, oh, wow, turned out she was going through that. Well, good for her. She didn't let anybody know. In other words, she didn't make us suffer for it. So that's bullshit. That's what makes ulcers. So seriously, get social support, get help. We're pack animals. We really are. That's why we suffered so bad during COVID, because we didn't have that.
Yes.
We didn't have that human touch, that camaraderie. I mean, physically human touch. So we're pack animals. Get help, get support, be more communal than we older generations have been. Bring that
Amen.
back. Bring that back.
Yep. What's your favorite boomer era word or phrase?
I thought a funny one was make love, not war. That was very hippie.
Oh, yes. Yes.
But I'd like to say be love, not war. Still kind of freaked out that we're in all these wars. It blows my mind that humans can do such bullshit, quite frankly. So I changed that to be love, not war. And I actually looked up.
Oh,
I was looking up all this Gen X stuff because I swear, seeing your podcast made me say, "Wait, what are Gen Xers thinking and saying?" I literally started looking it up, and it was like, "I want my MTV" was one of them. All of them, I could relate to because I'm such on the young end of the spectrum. So I'm thinking you all are turning 60 next year. I mean, Xers are starting to turn 60. That's a big one. But I want my MTV. That was so cool. It was so groovy.
I listened to a podcast series recently. Put this on your list, and I've mentioned it in some of the emails I send out during the week, and I'll put it in the show notes for those that are curious. Mm-hmm. But there's a podcast series now. I forget who the host is, but he's a former MTV VJ. For those that don't know what that is, it's video DJ. But it's called "Who Killed the Video Star," and it's about the rise and fall of MTV. Fascinating. I was completely captivated.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. All right. A boomer era theme song for your life.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Ain't No Mountain High Enough. Because although that was kind of written for a love song, but if you think about it as a mantra for not letting anything get in your way, no river wide enough will keep me from my goals.
Yes.
And I'm just...
That gave me goosebumps. Yeah, me too. I love that song. And last one, what are you most proud of being a boomer?
Oh boy. I mean, the fact that we have paved the way in so many ways. I mean, the hippies back in the day really took society and threw it up, upended it, and at least tried to protest the war. The fact they could think, they started thinking for themselves. Otherwise, we'd be a bunch of robots, right? We'd be stuck in a 50s suit going to work with a briefcase and leather shoes. So they shook it up. And I know, it bums me out a little bit that younger generations make fun of boomers. And I have to admit, when they get old and crabby, it's not cool. But there's a lot of us, that are really freaking alive. And I belong to, kind of want to give a shout out to the MEA, which is the Modern Elder Academy, started by Chip Conley. And they started it as a midlife wisdom school, and I've gone to their Baja campus and I've taken some online courses through them. And I tell you, everybody you meet there is a boomer on fire, a boomer alive, looking for their next steps. It's like, what's next? So we're paving the way for a more exciting third act, or whatever we want to call this. We hope to be a good example to the younger generations. I really want to. I don't want to be that kvetchy older person. I want to be festive.
The Alicia Keys song "This Girl's on Fire" just came into my head, but with a revision to it that was like, "This boomer's on fire." You were saying it. And yes, I would love to have, by the way, Chip Conley, I'd love to have you on the podcast. I heard him on the Ritual podcast several episodes ago. Follow him on LinkedIn. His MEA is amazing. I get his emails too. So I'll link that in the show notes because that's a great resource. And
he puts out the best daily. I can't believe the guy's the most prolific writer there is. Yeah. He's just so alive and so full of life. And he was a beautiful writer. Yes.
Yeah. That's so cool. You've gone to some things out there. I'd love to get out there to some of the workshops and retreats. Yeah.
Really good people.
Why don't we just start our own? Let's just start our own.
Yes. Do it, Michele. Let's do it. They also have a retreat centers in Santa Fe, so you don't have to go out of the country to go.
That's true. Yep. True. So where can folks find you, Suzanne?
I am Suzanne Campi on LinkedIn, and that's your typical boomer name, Suzanne, and last name is Campi, Campi. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm the only one I know of out there. And then SuzanneCampi.com, as simple as that goes.
And I want to mention, in addition to the wheel that folks can download on your website, you also can do a free 30-minute consultation with you. Yes, so if they want to learn more, talk about what issues they're struggling with in terms of transition and how you might be able to support them, I encourage them to reach out to you for that
Thank
consult.
you, Michele. Thank you. Yes, there's a Calendly link on my website.
Good. And I'll find that and I'll put that in the show notes just so that people have one less thing to find and click through. You know, people be wanting ease. Easy.
Okay.
The easy button.
That's one thing about these younger generations. Everything has to be easy.
Yeah. Man.
We want it
you know,
to be
Gen
easy.
Xers are like that too.
Complicated.
Yeah.
Well, everything's so complicated.
Yeah.
That's
The
a
number
whole
of Gen
thing.
Xers I talk to, like, oh, I have to click on 5 things. I'm like, yeah, it takes you 2 seconds. Click, click, click. Be done.
Michele, I want to thank you. You're a
Thank you
fabulous,
so much for this
fabulous
conversation.
podcaster, fabulous interviewer. It's really been fun. We will
Oh, I appreciate that. And I'm so grateful that you reached out. And I look forward to seeing how our paths continue to intersect.
Yeah.
And because we're in the same world, we're doing similar work. And I think it'd be really awesome if we could team up on some things. So I'm really grateful to get to know you and spend this time with you.
Let's teach a course.
Yes. Yes.
Have a fun.
All right.
And you know what? I picture a lot of community. I like picture people getting together. People need to get together
I do too.
physically.
I do too.
So
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. All right. Thank you, Suzanne. Take care. I hope that conversation inspired you to look at some of these transitions from a more holistic place, especially your transition into retirement, if that's where you are. Remember to go to her website, download the free wheel so you can start to look more holistically at your retirement through the lens of those categories that she has. Book a free consult with her and make sure to check out the resources from William Bridges that I'll link in the show notes. And look, Suzanne hit on this toward the end of the conversation, but she mentioned that the only thing constant is change. And I was reflecting on this the other day that every single microsecond we're changing. You aren't the same person that you were 2 seconds ago, let alone 2 days ago, 2 months ago, 2 years ago. Yet, when it comes to making changes and transitions in our life, especially the big ones like around retirement or divorce or even our own death, we can get so paralyzed and wrapped around the axle. So I encourage you to start to reflect on the spectrum of change. There are these little microseconds of changes that we don't even notice, all the way up through the massive changes that feel like they put us with our backs up against the wall, and everything in between on that spectrum. And at some point, you have changes that you feel are acceptable, and at some point you have changes that you feel are unacceptable. So start to get curious about where you get the stories and beliefs about what changes you think are acceptable and unacceptable. Because that can start to give you feedback about how you're approaching this transition that you might be struggling to move through. Remember, as Gen Xers, we are so conditioned to want to do things on our own. And as Suzanne reminded us, we're meant to be in community. So how can you start to build your community in a way that will support you into this transition that you want to make, whether that's retirement or changes in your physical health, whatever it might be. Thanks so much for tuning in this week. Remember to do me a huge solid if you can to like, share, review the podcast. Send me an email at podcast@lifefromthesummit if you want to share any reflections or if you have an idea for a topic or a guest that you'd like to explore. Thanks so much for tuning in, and until next time, stay gold, Gen Xers.